It's my pleasure to be here with Mike Galloway, who is the Director of City Development at Dundee City Council. I had the pleasure of meeting Mike and members of his team and seeing a very beautiful city, although without sunlight in my case. But
indeed.
That's all right. And you got to see a little bit of it there. It's a very diverse city, though very small geographically. Mike, just to sort of give people the picture, could you contrast for us the Dundee that you know today with the Dundee of the 1970s?
Okay, I mean, Dundee is was a typical post-industrial city. It has a long history, goes back probably about 1,000 years. It was actually created as a planned town by the King of Scotland at the time to civilise the countryside.
How did that work out?
It's still working. It's still working. And during the Industrial Revolution, the city boomed as new industries took off. Prior to that, it had been the second city in Scotland, mainly a Baltic port trading with the Baltic and Hanseatic League, and a big whaling industry as well. But then new technologies took off, particularly in terms of large mills, a large influx of population, fairly typical industrial scene we see in the Western world. But by the beginning of the 20th century, the signs of decline were there. What was quite unique in Dundee was that the manufacturing industry actually clung on. 2 world wars kind of propped that up, and we still had a very high manufacturing component up until about the 1960s. And then the bottom completely fell out of that. And we lost employment, we lost population. And in the 1970s was my first personal taste of Dundee. I wasn't originally from Dundee, and I went there to study. And I went to the university in the 70s. And I had a great time. And students still have a great time in Dundee.
Yes, they do.
And
I met a number of them.
I enjoyed my time there, but it was very clear that, you know, the city was fairly typical to my hometown of Glasgow. They were going through that similar problems of deindustrialisation and finding a new purpose for themselves. When I graduated, I left town, and I moved on and I worked all across the UK. And it was quite interesting in that I went back for a reunion celebration 15 years ago, and was quite astounded by what was happening to the city. Regeneration was occurring, the growth of the university that I'd studied in, its diversification into biotechnology, new emerging industries, the formation of a second university at Abertay, the way that the infrastructure in the city had been radically improved, a whole pedestrianised city centre. And I stayed there for the weekend during that reunion, and my impression of Dundee changed dramatically. I still had a good impression from my student days. More importantly, my wife's impression of Dundee changed dramatically as well, going back to a comment that was made earlier. And a matter of 2 months later, I found myself moving to Dundee. It's one of these synchronicities that happens in life. And we've been able, in the last 15 years, to take that regeneration process even further with the development of the universities in particular. About 25% of our population are students. It's one of the highest in Europe in terms of proportion of higher education students to overall population. And the way that the city has managed to recapture its regional centre role. We are now a true city region again. Dundee is a thriving retail centre, thriving cultural centre, embryonic tourism industry. It's really a very dramatic turnaround. What's important is that we set ourselves new goals. It's like a ladder, and you've got to always look to what is the next rung on that ladder.
Well, now, a large number of things helped to bring about this transformation, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about the role of the Dundee Partnership in doing it. You know, these big partnerships, if you will, very often end up being press release events rather than real events, or as the British have a great phrase, the gathering of the great and the good. I've always liked that because of the assumption that the great are not necessarily the same as the good. Why did this produce action as opposed to talk? And what was it, I guess, first of all, and why did it produce?
Okay, I mean, I've experienced different forms of partnership working. Everybody claims to work in partnership. And in London, Glasgow, Manchester, I've experienced different forms of partnerships. And prior to going to Dundee, my feeling was that they never really were truly as collaborative as they claimed to be. There was always some form of dysfunction there in the partnership. And that's not meant as a criticism of those places. But when I came to Dundee, I found the partnership to be quite unique. It was a virtual partnership in the first place. It had no staff, it had no budget, it had no premises. But what it had was a strong alignment of public bodies, private sector, academia, all working together at all levels within their organisations. So in some partnerships I've seen the chief executives get on and they make a strategic alignment, but at the coalface people are not working together. And I've also seen it work the other way around. In Dundee it works at all levels. And importantly as well, it's worked now for about 25 years and it continually refreshes itself. It started back in the 1980s as the Dundee project, which is basically when the government came to town to regenerate us, and then metamorphosed into the Dundee Partnership, which was much more of an economic development-led approach. And then more recently, it's changed again into a community planning partnership, which is a different type of relationship, not only with our partners in Dundee and in the rest of the region, but with the Scottish Government as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we now have what's called a single outcome agreement, right, which the government is essentially a pact between the city as a partnership and the government. So the government has given us autonomy in terms of how we use the financial resources that they give us, but we have to achieve certain targets. And we have to renew those every year. We have to measure ourselves against them. And each of the organisations that's part of the partnership, including all the public bodies, both the universities and the business sector, sign up to that each year and refresh it. So that's quite unique. It's a great pacing mechanism. But the other important thing I think about the partnership in Dundee is the focus that there has been on trying to improve the city's image. Because the reality of Dundee has changed dramatically since the 1970s. But a lot of people in the rest of Scotland and the UK still have this old image. So a very strong thread in the partnership has been marketing. And as we were discussing yesterday, not just external marketing, but internal marketing to our own population. And we've recently refreshed that with a new One City, Many Discoveries campaign, which takes the city of discovery on to a new level. So I think the partnership is one of the reasons why I've stayed in Dundee. I've been there 15 years now. That's the longest time I've ever spent in any one job, and I have no intention of leaving.
One of the secrets that was expressed to me by a couple of people about the way the partnership evolved was that it began with people, you talked about the levels of participation. It said it evolved with people on the staff level beginning to have meetings and interact, and it went on for several years that way with not a great deal of progress, but the progress that was achieved was vital, which was trust building.
Yes.
And it was when those relationships were solidified that then senior levels came in, and then you had the basis, you had a foundation, if you will, for that. And I thought that was a great best practice because that's not usually how it's thought of.
Yes, it removed any jealousies,
right,
and any point scoring, which is what I've experienced in other cities. Right. And that doesn't exist in Dundee. The people do get on, right, and the organisations get on as well.
Well, that's because you're all such nice people. Okay, so you've already mentioned the universities. Would you call the universities and colleges your partners in the development of the city? I mean, do they really come to the table that way? And how are they involved in helping students kind of cross that last mile to careers that are local as opposed to taking their talents south to London?
Okay. The universities are absolutely crucial to our future. The experience over the last 20, 30 years shows us that, and our plans for the future emphasise that even further. We have a phrase that we use which is town and gown. So the city and the university are locked together. University staff and leaders sit on our major initiatives and committees and boards. and we as city officials sit on the university's main committees and decision-making bodies. We lean on each other, we rely on each other, and I don't think that without that collaboration we would be as successful. We really do rely on one another. And in terms of how that manifests itself in support for students moving into the workplace, it's really about people like myself coming back to the city. We are attracting more and more leaders in their field back to Dundee, and they are being successful in the city, but they're also putting something back into the academic world. So the mentorship that they're offering in their particular field and helping students to see their opportunity, to see their future role in their particular industry, rather than it being a false experience of studying at a university. It's a very real experience. Dare to be Digital is a good example of that, and I'm sure we'll speak about that in a moment or two.
We'd better, because yes, we will, because it's one of my favorite examples.
It's a fantastic example, but there are others as well in terms of other fields in biomedics and other aspects of digital media. But as well as the universities, we put a lot of emphasis on our schools and helping our pupils to understand what future roles and opportunities there are for them in employment. We do have social inequality in the city, like most post-industrial cities, and there are generations of families who have not been in work. And we work very hard in our schools to raise the aspirations of those pupils in particular. And we run, for example, a mini version of Dare to be Digital, which is Daring Schools, where we bring 5th and 6th year pupils who are in art and design and computing and other such fields into Abertay University, where the gaming courses are, and for a period of a fortnight they engage with the staff, with the leaders in the industries, to actually explore making games and what's possible in the world of business and the world of employment that they perhaps have never imagined, and certainly have not had handed down to them from their parents and grandparents.
Right. Let's just changing topics for a moment. When I was there, I learned about something I guess I would call a coup, which is your I3. I write this 3I, I3, 3I. I don't know which it is. Fiber City project. Could you just tell us about that? Why did it come to Dundee, and what is it, and where is it going?
It's I3, and there used to be HTO. So
that would have helped me a lot.
They're a communications company, and we've reached a partnership agreement with them for them to install fibre cable, right throughout the city of Dundee to every household and to every business in the city, mainly utilising the sewer network, but also running through our own infrastructure of roads and footways and pavements. And that will supply, free of charge, fibre optics to each and every household and business. It will then be for service providers to plug into those and into the homes and into the businesses themselves. And this is a £30 million investment at no cost to the council. And in fact, what we've got out of it is that all of our public sector housing will be wired up internally as well. So we will have the ability to provide very high quality 100 megabyte services to our socially disadvantaged population throughout the city. At the moment, we're about 75% broadband in residential areas, with speeds up to about 20 megabytes, depending on how far you are away from the exchange. So this is a real step up in terms of the provision. And why Dundee? And it's an interesting thought. We're the first city in Scotland they've tackled. They've got a project underway at the moment in Bournemouth in England. And we think it's something to do with the compactness of our city. We are quite a dense city. As I've said, we have a high proportion of students, so there's a readily available market for them there. But we also think it's things like the ICF as well. The fact that we've been named 3 years out of 4 in the top 7 I think has attracted the attention of companies like Fibre City.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
We've now reached formal agreement with them. They have undertaken test installations in the city centre. We're moving on to full installation within the next month, and with completion planned within 18 months. This is going to revolutionise the infrastructure within the city.
Again, I mean, back in the 2007, 2008, there were a lot of free broadband projects that were, introduced here in the States, and all of them collapsed. And all of a sudden, these guys are getting 30 million pounds of investment, for nothing. And I got a chance to meet with some of the project team and ask the question, so what's different? And the answer, what's different? Television is what's different. We now have the triple play, and they think they have a business case to lease this capacity to cable providers and internet providers and voice over internet providers, and there's enough density to make it work. I'm cheering them on because I would love to see that business model work. Let's see how we're doing here in terms of, we're doing pretty well. You have a major waterfront redevelopment project, good old-fashioned, urban development of the kind that goes back decades. Could you tell us about that, its goals, its funding and timeline, and how does that fit into your intelligent community strategy?
Okay, the waterfront in Dundee is our front door.
Yes.
It's as we built out into the river estuary, creating new dockland areas. When those became redundant, they were infilled in the 1960s and 1970s. And when the road bridge was built across the estuary, it landed right in the central waterfront area between the city centre and the river. And it's a mini motorway network with overhead pedestrian walkways to a few brutalist buildings, including the office block that I work in. So it's a big barrier between the city centre and the fantastic estuary setting that we have. But it's also the first experience that people have when they arrive in Dundee. It's where the main railway station is. It's where the main road routes come into the city. And, first impressions count. And if we're trying to change our image, then it was a major obstacle to making that breakthrough. But it was also a fantastic opportunity. Hectares of land, south-facing, over an estuary, right next to a rejuvenated city centre. So we set up a project with other public agencies to extend the city centre down to the river, simple grid network with mixed-use development of housing, offices, leisure and tourism facilities. And why that's important to our objectives of making an intelligent community. Yes, it's providing floor space for new businesses. And yes, it's providing the type of housing that our graduates are looking for. But it's actually creating a lifestyle. It's a great opportunity to create a new urban quarter that creates buzz. And if we're trying to retain talent in the city, we've got great graduates that are coming out of our universities, we want them to stay in Dundee for longer. And we can provide the jobs, and we can provide the right housing, but they want a lifestyle as well. And the waterfront gives us that opportunity to create it. The project is now fully funded. We have £70 million in place to create all the infrastructure. And in particular, we're working on an adjunct to the waterfront called Seabraze, where we're creating a digital media park. And that's very focused on trying to retain embryonic digital businesses coming out of both universities, particularly in the computer gaming field. And for example, we're proposing to construct a flexible container city on this area of former railway yards so that we create flexible space for new, small, embryonic businesses at very, very low peppercorn rents. And allow those businesses then to grow. We will nurture them and move them onto the next rung of premises. So it's a project that is making a sort of paradigm shift for Dundee, but also trying to provide a range of accommodation at different costs. Another more recent important component of the waterfront is the proposal to bring an outpost of the Victoria and Albert Museum to Dundee. The V&A in London it claims to be, and I certainly believe it is, the foremost design museum in the world. Its purpose when it was set up, over 120 years ago, was to take art and design and marry it with industry and product design. And it still follows those objectives today. And we are now working with the museum on creating a £45 million new building jutting out from the city centre into the river as a new cultural facility, but more than just a tourist attraction, somewhere that actually makes a connection between our art and design courses in the universities and industry and product design, and in particular into digital product design. So this is a great opportunity to create a waterfront that actually comes alive with this new V&A facility at its heart.
When I was returning from Dundee, I was stuck in London for a day by a big snowstorm here in the States. And, there's worse places to be stuck. And I thought, what a great opportunity. I've never been there. So I went to the V&A. It's a very impressive museum. Okay, Dare to be Digital. You introduced that earlier. I think it's a symbol of the transformation of Dundee. Tell us about how that works.
It's an initiative led by Abertay University, but supported by all the partners in the Dundee Partnership. And it's a competition, it's a challenge to students throughout the world to come forward in teams and apply to be part of a 10-week program based in Dundee at Abertay University to design and take forward ideas for new games in a real test lab environment. And within that 10-week period, to actually develop a working game which can be tested by the public, by the leaders in that particular industry, and with the support and mentoring of them, and then an award being given to the best games at the end of that process. This year we had 105 teams submitting. We have 15 teams coming from across the globe to Dundee in the summer. And it's amazing to see the quality of what's produced in that short period of time, just the intellectual product that's created and the value of that to businesses in Dundee, the fact that these students are snapped up, they're headhunted from across the world, and a lot of them stay in Dundee. So it's very much about engaging with university students, mentoring them, inspiring them, giving them an experience of what working life is like in this emerging industry. And it's a different lifestyle entirely, obviously, and about us capturing and retaining talent within the city. It's now being recognised by BAFTA, the British Film Awards, in terms of computer gaming, that if you win the Dare to be Digital, you're virtually guaranteed of winning the up-and-coming games designer in the BAFTA Awards.
I just love the program because it does all those things, plus it's a magnificent marketing for Abertay University and for Dundee. Yeah, it's an amazing confluence of things that I think is truly intelligent in the best possible way. Okay, well, we're getting close to the end here. I just want to ask you, I know we're, of course, stumbling our way slowly out of the global recession, we being the U.S., North America, and Europe, not so much Latin America, and not at all most of Asia. But I know it's hit the United Kingdom particularly hard, and I'm just curious as to how you think Dundee has stood up to it and what you expect to come out in the next few years, because your economy is completely different than it was back in the 1970s where we started.
Yes, I mean, the recession has hit Dundee as it has the whole of the UK. It's not hit us any more disproportionately than the rest of the UK, which is a good thing because in the past it would have hit us harder, I think. We've lost something like 3,000 jobs over the last year. But interestingly, although we've lost 3,000 jobs out of our stock, we've increased our IT jobs by 1,000. So there's a definite shift there and different fortunes comparing manufacturing to IT and research and development. Very interestingly, when NCR moved their manufacturing to lower wage locations, they kept their R&D in Dundee. And that's a recognition, I think, of the importance of knowledge and intelligence in the city. But it's an interesting period during the recession at the moment, because the public sector in Dundee is really focusing on getting the infrastructure right so that we can pick up the curve when we come out of the recession. We are investing heavily in physical infrastructure in the city. We're getting very keen prices at the moment, so you can build a lot with your money. But it's not just the hard infrastructure that we're investing in. We're investing in training as well, getting people who are currently unemployed ready for going into the workforce. And in particular, trying to spot which is going to be the new emerging industry for Dundee and its city region. And in particular, we're very aware of the potential of the renewables industry for Scotland. In the next 10 years, we have to increase our carbon-free energy sources up to 30%. And in order to do that, we really have to embrace wind power. It's the only reliable technology that we have to deliver such a big increase in 10 years. And therefore, in the first phase, 6,000 new turbines will be built out into the North Sea. And Dundee is the closest port to those turbines. So we're looking at the new technologies and how you actually install these in 50 metres of water, and how we construct them, how we operate and maintain them, as being a great opportunity for a new industry in Dundee, and one that lasts longer than oil and gas and doesn't pollute like oil and gas. So we're getting our workforce ready for that, and in particular, the knowledge and the intelligence that's necessary to develop the technologies to unleash that potential and then to export it around the world. So that's the next challenge that's facing us.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good one. We've been speaking with Mike Galloway, Director of City Development for the Dundee City Council. Mike, I wish you, having experienced Dundee myself, I wish you and the city every possible luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.